workers because they brought out some baseball bats and some axe handles and started cracking heads and breaking arms. That might be what needs to be done again. You need to learn from history, folks. My opinion. Let me continue the story. The company's last offer was for a below-inflation raise or bonus of 2% each year, which would be eaten up by a rise in out-of-pocket health care expenses of around 3 to 15%. I'm going to stop there for a quick second. Now, remember, GM and UAW bosses were trying to negotiate this contract and not tell the rank and file what was involved in this contract.
What do you think of that?
I think it's bogus. I think it's absolute horse crap.
What's bogus?
It's bogus of them colluding together. The UAW leadership and General Motors colluding together and not letting the workers in on the details. I'm sorry, the workers need to know what's going on.
Okay, when you say bogus, you mean it happened, but you don't agree.
It happened, and I don't agree with it.
Yeah,
they need to let the workers know exactly what the hell's going on.
I was
period.
confused there. It did happen. They did that,
Yes.
and that is a trait of the union bargaining today. It's not grassroots; it's power on top.
And by the way, this is the same UAW leadership that's under federal investigation.
Yeah, which people don't really seem to care much about that.
Yeah. So I'll say something my dad used to tell me all the time. Union is only as good as its rank and file. If you're not showing up for union meetings, you're part of the problem. You need to show up to your union meetings, you union members.
Well, it's a microcosm of democracy in itself.
Yeah.
If you think that elected person up there who you've just given a mantle of power, you can trust unequivocally and you can just go on vacation and not worry about it, you're sadly mistaken. You got to hold their feet to the fire. I was in the union here, and I've shared the stories of how rotten and corrupt and complicit the leadership of the union as a teachers union was with the leadership in the administration. Mm-hmm. And that's across the board. So when you tell me they're meeting secretly, you tell me that the leadership of UAW...
it's not even secret.
And
it's out in the open, but they're not letting in the details to the rank and file.
That's a trademark of what's wrong with the unions today.
Why do you think every plant that had rank and file in the GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler plants, why do you think the votes to authorize strike in every single instance was well over 90%? Every single one of them.
See, when you have the union leadership sitting across the table from big money, big power, big UA power, I don't care if it's on the auto industry or what industry, when you have these people sitting there, wafting in the smell of power, just breathing in the monetary influence that these representatives have, it corrupts them. You need to go out to the line where there's a guy with 2 kids at home that can't afford braces. You need to go out and let that guy do the thinking on the offers from management.
Power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Let me continue the story here. Again, this is the World Socialist website. As the Wall Street Journal wrote Thursday, GM's chief executive Mary Barra, quote, is trying to shed the automaker's long-held reputation for ignoring problems and show Wall Street that today's GM is leaner and more assertive than the one that collapsed into bankruptcy a decade ago. End of quote. After an initial fall in share values after the strike began Monday, GM stocks have risen, although there was a slight fall at the end of the day Thursday. Wall Street investors are willing to bankroll the fight against workers, but the credit rating agency Moody's threatened to downgrade GM to junk bond status if it does not quickly defeat the strike and impose its demands. So this is basically, you've got all these rich snobs in New York that are betting on this. Because that's all it is. It's legalized gambling.
Yeah.
Workers are determined to claw back concessions handed over by the United Auto Workers, including during the 2009 restructuring of General Motors by the Obama administration. Over the last 10 years, workers have suffered a 16% fall in real wages. Over the course of the last 4-year UAW agreement alone, GM has made $35 billion with a B dollars in profits. The UAW, however, is deliberately isolating the striking GM workers by ordering 110,000 Ford and Fiat Chrysler workers to remain on the job. Inside the factories, there is a widespread support for an industry-wide walkout. A Ford worker in Michigan told the World Socialist website Auto Worker newsletter, quote, "We all want to go on strike. We are watching what's going on with this strike every day very carefully. Every worker is on the edge of their seat. I feel that something really big is going to need to happen. What should happen is that all the workers from Ford, Fiat, Chrysler, and General Motors should be called out on strike. We have been ready to strike, but the UAW doesn't listen to the membership. The union is corrupt, all of them, from International President Gary Jones, whose house was just raided by the FBI, all the way down to the locals are making deals with the company." End of quote. Another worker at Fiat Chrysler Sterling Heights assembly plant in suburban Detroit said, quote, "We should have shut it all down. Then the companies would have known this is real. The parts plant should definitely be part of this too. It should be spread everywhere." End of quote.
And I'm not obviously supporting the administration, GM, in any way. Their response has been back that the problem is that there's no cars being sold, that the factories have to be revamped and adjusted to make something that's going to appeal to the public because cars aren't doing it.
Well, no, I'm gonna tell you this. This right here is my opinion. I'm just going to state it right here because Ford has decided they're going to stop making cars, period. Except for the Mustang, and I think they're making another model, and I can't remember which one it is.
The big one isn't Lincoln.
But no, I'm just talking Ford. I'm not talking the Lincoln subsidiary.
Okay.
And Chevy's followed suit. They're getting rid of the Cruze, and they're getting rid of this and that and the other. And what they're trying to do, this isn't the cars aren't selling. And I can tell you why cars aren't selling. It's because people can't afford new cars. Mm-hmm. So what are they going to do? GM and Ford, well, we're going to quit making cars. We're going to make people buy these SUVs and pickup trucks.
3 times as much.
Which, yeah. Have you looked at the price of a brand new pickup truck lately?
Startling.
$45,000 for a baseline pickup truck. And yet they think people aren't buying the cars. They'll just buy the trucks.
They make more money with it.
They can't afford either.
Yeah, exactly.
Do they not get it through their thick heads, or do they not give a damn?
Darren, is that the oil companies. Why do the oil companies want trucks over cars?
Sell more gas.
Sell more gas. I saw a study once where, and this was a pretty broad scope study. They checked the lights. When a light was red and it had 8 pickups, or SUVs, whatever you want to call it, as opposed to 8 sedans. Mm-hmm. Not compacts, sedans.
Yeah.
The time sitting there idling with the pickups, and you multiply this times what? Millions of lights across the United States.
Yeah.
Just the gas consumed because you've got 50, 60 feet more of weight line, right? Or I don't know. I'm pulling that number out. You got 160 feet. I don't care. With 5 drivers in pickups as opposed to 5 drivers in a Honda sedan. The gas just burnt while you're waiting because you're going to wait for 2, 3 lights where the cars would be out of there in 1 is tons of fuel.
Well, they got a new remedy for that. Have you heard of this? Have you seen these cars with this auto stop feature?
No, what do you mean?
My mom just bought a 2018 Chevy Cruze.
Yeah.
When you come up to a light and you mash the brake and you come to a full and complete stop, the engine automatically shuts off. When you release the brake pedal, the engine will kick back on.
Oh, really?
That's in every brand new car just about, from at least GM that I've seen. I don't know if Ford and Chrysler have picked up on this technology, but here's the thing. If that computer goes out, you're really screwed. Because that's thousands of dollars to replace the computer. As a matter of fact, the GM dealers sell insurance on just the computer alone.
Listen, Darren, I can remember the old wise tale. I remember we had one of those mechanical uncles, right? And he'd say, "Hey, don't shut your car off at the light. It costs you more gas because when you got to start it, you got to pump it. You don't save anything." Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was 10 when I heard that, and I thought there has to be a point somewhere. I mean, what if it's a 20-minute wait for a traffic obstruction? You just can't say unequivocally, don't shut your engine off. Now I know there's wear and tear in a starter, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Bottom line, these trucks, they burn a lot more fuel. Yeah, I was in Europe, as you know, for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see a big pickup truck anywhere.
No.
They got farms. In traffic. You can see the light 6-7 cars away. Here you can't see anything but the guy that's got the full-size pickup and an NRA sticker on the back.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to continue the story. Referring to the gross levels of inequality in America, the same Fiat Chrysler Sterling Heights Assembly employee added, quote, I just saw the Bill Gates just made another $16 billion. This money came from the sweat off somebody's back. End of quote. She's right. In an effort to starve workers into submission, the UAW is giving strikers $250 in strike pay, and they will not see the first check until the end of the second week of picketing. The UAW has also organized no mass picketing or demonstrations against GM strike-breaking operations. On the contrary, it has welcomed the strike-breaking as a means of intimidating workers. On Wednesday, workers reacted with disgust and anger when a UAW official who they identified as Local 651 President Brett Baker ordered them to break their picket lines and allow a line of cars filled with strikebreakers to enter the GM Davidson Road Processing Center in Burton, a suburb of Flint. Mm-hmm. In a letter released Thursday, UAW Vice President Terry Ditties told striking GM workers that negotiating teams had been meeting into the evening each day since the strike began. He claimed that some progress has been made and that talks were underway in subcommittees and main tables. Ditties gave workers absolutely no details of what the company was demanding or what, if any, counterproposals the UAW had made. In fact, the behind-the-scenes talk with GM are aimed at one thing, seeking to find the best way to impose a deal worked out long ago on a resistant workforce, which correctly sees the UAW as little more than a bribed tool of management. If workers do not take the conduct of this struggle into their own hands, the UAW will isolate the strike and shut it down on management's terms. This is why auto workers must form rank-and-file strike and factory committees to bring out all workers throughout the auto and auto parts industry and fight to transform the industrial action into a powerful social movement of the working class against the decades-long war by the corporate and financial elite. A network of rank-and-file committees must also reach out to workers internationally. It is not possible to even conduct an effective strike, let alone a broader fight against plant closings, layoffs, and wage cutting without uniting workers across borders. This means rejecting the filthy nationalism and anti-Mexican chauvinism promoted by the UAW, the Unifor Union in Canada, the Trump administration, and the Democrats. The international dimensions of the struggle are quickly emerging. After a 3-day strike last week, thousands of GM workers in South Korea are resuming job actions today to oppose company demands for an extension of a pay freeze. GM shut a plant in Gunsan last year as part of its global restructuring, which also involves the shutdown of 5 North American plants, including assembly plants in Detroit, Lordstown, Ohio, and Oshawa, Ontario, Canada. The 47,000 striking GM workers in the U.S. are part of a much larger global workforce, including 58,000 production workers in China, 16,000 in Mexico, and 10,000 in Canada. Workers at GM's factory in Silao, Mexico have stood up to vindictive firings and disciplinary action and refused to accept GM's demand for additional production to make up for the loss of pickup trucks due to the U.S. strike. The walkout in the U.S. has already hit GM's Canadian operations, leading to layoffs in Oshawa and St. Catharines, as well as suppliers in Windsor, such as Martin Transportation Systems, which laid off 80 workers. Layoffs have also hit suppliers in Mexico, including the Lear Auto Parts plant at Ramos Arizpe, which told 150 of its 700 workers who produce seats and armrests to go home. A Fiat Chrysler worker at the Sterling Heights plant said, quote, "Wow, an international solidarity is a must. Workers globally should become allies. We cannot allow corporations to continue to pit us against each other."
Used to be that way.
End of quote.
Used to have that way. Seattle, everybody went on strike. Everybody. First time. Mm-hmm. Darren, can I read something that runs parallel to that. Okay,
Sure.
You mentioned the arrest of the picketers. 5